For 10 years on JAG, these officers chased the truth in a courtroom. The truth about their own lives proved stranger than any case. One of them built a Hollywood career on a lie that only unraveled at his own funeral. Another walked away from fame 3 separate times. 2 are gone now. Here is where all of them landed. We begin with the face the show was built on. Long before he ever wore a naval officer's uniform, David James Elliott walked away from his own high school diploma to chase a wilder dream, fronting a rock band in small Ontario clubs. He came back at 19 to finish school, auditioned his way into the Stratford Shakespearean Festival's Young Company for 2 years, and only then drifted toward acting under a stage name he adopted after discovering another David Smith already working. Audiences knew him as Harmon Rabb Jr., the aviator grounded by night blindness who traded the cockpit for a courtroom. The romance that shaped his life moved slower than any plot the writers gave him. He met a Canadian actress named Nancy Chambers in the late 1980s, then lost her to distance when he chased work in Los Angeles and she stayed behind in Toronto. Worn down by the miles between them, he simply showed up on her doorstep one day and asked her to come build a life with him. They married at Los Angeles City Hall in 1992, with almost nothing to their name, a ceremony so plain that 7 years later they held the wedding all over again in Santa Barbara, their young daughter walking down the aisle as Flower Girl. Chambers later joined him on the series as the sharp-edged Lieutenant Lauren Singer, making them one of the rare Hollywood couples who shared the same call sheet. More than 3 decades on, that marriage still holds, along with the 2 children it gave them, Stephanie and Wyatt. His career proved just as durable. Where most leads of a 10-year hit fade once the cameras stop, Elliott kept landing top billing, a wrestling patriarch in heels and a small-town sheriff in the 2025 series Revival, and he even slipped back into Harm's old uniform for a return on NCIS Los Angeles. Away from the set, he has run the Boston Marathon to raise money for youth programs, an echo of the steady decency he gave his most famous character. He turned 65 in the autumn of 2025 and still works steadily out of Los Angeles, the rare star who outlived his signature role without ever resenting it. Harmon Rabb was the unshakable officer who always found true north. David James Elliott was the Canadian dropout who wanted to be a rock star, gambled everything on a woman in another city, and built a marriage that has lasted longer than most careers. Our second story belongs to a woman who almost never made it onto the show at all. Catherine Bell first appeared on JAG in a tiny 3-line part, a role killed off and forgotten, and by every normal rule of television that should have been the end of her time there. She refused to accept it. Sitting down with nothing to lose, she wrote a letter directly to the show's creator Donald Bellisario, asking him to build a lead character for her, and against every odd, the plan worked. She played Sarah Mackenzie, the Iron Marine lawyer who stood as Harm's equal across 9 seasons. The grit behind that letter was forged early. Born in London to a Scottish architect father and an Iranian mother, she was 2 years old when her parents divorced, and she grew up in the San Fernando Valley raised by her mother and Iranian grandparents, speaking Persian at the dinner table. She studied biology at UCLA, dropped out to model in Japan, worked for a time as a masseuse, and stood in as a body double before her own face ever carried a scene. Writers eventually folded her heritage into the character, letting Mackenzie speak Persian on screen, a quiet nod to the girl from the valley. Her personal life carried its own turns. She married a production assistant named Adam Beeson in 1994, had a daughter and a son with him, and separated in 2011 after the family sold their California home. In the years that followed, she relocated toward Clearwater, Florida, and built a life largely out of the public eye. A practicing Scientologist who has spoken openly about reaching the state the church calls clear, she once used a writer's strike to teach herself to fly a small plane. Once the series ended, she became one of television's busiest leading women all over again, anchoring Army Wives for 6 seasons and then carrying Hallmark's Good Witch films and series for more than a decade as Cassie Nightingale, stepping behind the camera as a producer along the way. She is 57 now and still working. Sarah Mackenzie was handed her authority by the United States Marine Corps. Catherine Bell earned hers with a single letter that talked a producer into inventing a starring role from nothing. Years before JAG, she had first met the next name on this list while both were burning with fever on a film set in Thailand, and his story ends in a secret no one saw coming. The accent was a lie. Every detail of the boxing-scarred Australian ex-convict who clawed his way to Hollywood was invented, and the fans never knew it, and neither, astonishingly, did the industry that hired him. Trevor Gooddard played Mick Brumby, the cocky Australian naval officer who circled Mac as Harm's rival and her near husband. His real story was almost ordinary by comparison. Born in Croydon, in South London, he was an English boy who drummed in punk bands as a teenager and boxed as a light heavyweight before sailing to America to act. He was discovered during a boxing match, drifted through beer commercials and small parts, and then turned the villain Kano in Mortal Kombat into a figure the video game itself later copied. Auditions had gone nowhere while he presented himself as an Englishman, so he reinvented himself wholesale, inventing a birthplace in Perth and a hard-luck criminal past, and the new identity worked so well that he beat actual Australians to Australian roles, once even winning the job of voicing a kangaroo over a line of genuine Australian actors. The press believed him. His own publicist believed him. He carried the fiction onto JAG and held it for years without a single crack. The ending came fast and cruel. In June of 2003, in the middle of a divorce and a custody fight over his two young sons, Travis and Daniel, Gooddard was found dead in his North Hollywood home at the age of 40. An autopsy found a lethal mix of heroin, cocaine, and prescription drugs, and though suicide was suspected at first, the coroner ruled the death accidental. His girlfriend was the one who found him. A small pirate role in Pirates of the Caribbean, his final film, reached theaters about a month after he died, and the Associated Press still called him Australian in its first reports of his passing. 16 days after his death, more than 400 people filled a memorial in Hollywood, and there, standing over his son's coffin, Gooddard's father, a retired London police inspector, finally told the room the truth. The Australian story was invented. Underneath it had always been an Englishman who spent his entire career making the world believe otherwise. Cremation followed, and his ashes were given to his family. No headstone marks him, no cemetery holds him, only the people who loved him and the secret his father set free at the very end. Mike Brumby was the swaggering outsider who finally won the audience over. Trevor Gooddard was a London gardener's son who built a second self so convincing that the lie outlived the man, and it took a grieving father to say the truth out loud. Halfway into our roster sits a man whose life began with a label no child should carry. Social workers called the malnourished, terrified infant unadoptable, and at 9 months old, Patrick Labyorteaux was taken in anyway by a Hollywood talent agent and an actress who refused that verdict. They gave him a home, a name, and 2 adopted siblings, a brother and a sister rescued the same way, and the boy who could not keep food down grew into a working child star. He played Bud Roberts, the eager junior officer who grew from comic relief into the warm heart of the series. Long before the Navy uniform, he was a fixture of American living rooms. From 1977, he played Andy Garvey on Little House on the Prairie, sharing the screen with his adopted brother Matthew, who played Albert Ingalls. The roles kept coming through the 80s, Heathers and Summer School among them, the second of those alongside a young Mark Harmon who would one day anchor NCIS. Near the end of JAG, the writers had Bud lose a leg to a landmine, and the recovery scenes played so convincingly that some viewers wondered whether the actor had truly lost it. Then JAG handed him something stranger than fiction. Bud's life on the show kept echoing his own a year behind, as he liked to tell it, because the character married, and a year later Labyorteaux married the show's producer, Tina Albanese, after the two quietly dated on set. Writers gave Bud a baby, and soon after his own wife was expecting their son, Zoe, born in 2001. The pair later created a television series together and stayed partners in work as well as life. His proudest credit never aired. Together with his brother, Labyorteaux founded a charity for runaway children and testified before a House subcommittee, helping raise $11 million for youth shelters across the country.